Welcome into this edition of the Pat White Show. We started off big this time. And will the president finally get down to the real Jeffrey Epstein story? That's our lead story on this edition, Season 3, Episode 33 of the Pat White Show, coming up next. Welcome to the Pat White Show. Well, it appears that the Schumer shutdown that lasted over 40 days and 40 nights has failed miserably. Democrats got absolutely nothing, and now, well, America's not real happy with what happened. Sure, Congress is going to be reopening up. That's fine and dandy, but there's still that issue of the subsidies that were going on involving the Obamacare. Where that's going to end up right now, nobody knows. But believe it or not, after the Schumer shutdown faded down just a bit, a new thing came up. A new email, according to the various mainstream media sources who put it out, said, oh, there's a new email released featuring one of Epstein's victims. They left the name of the individual out, saying, well, we can't release those names. Well, the problem is this. That so-called email that was supposed to have a victim's name that was redacted was already out in testimony. That's right. It was already out in testimony, and it's completely out there with the names and everything. But if you had it, you put down somebody else's, well, can't put that name out there. You're going to say, oh, this is new stuff. It's not new. Not new at all. The email says that an Epstein victim, whose name was redacted, like I said, we're trying to imply that Trump was involved. Well, turns out the whole thing is bogus. But today, Trump sent out an email on his Truth Social that said the following. Now the Democrats are using the Epstein hoax involving Democrats, not Republicans, to try to deflect from their disastrous shutdown and all the other failures. And it goes on. I will be asking AG Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice, together with our great patriots of the FBI, to investigate Jeffrey Epstein's involvement and relationship with Bill Clinton, Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, J.P. Morgan, and Chase, and many other people and institutions to determine what was going on with them and him. This is another Russia scam. All the arrows pointing to the Democrats. Records show that these men and many others spent large portions of their life with Epstein and on his island. Stay tuned. Now, Donald Trump just wrote that on his social media page, and he has just put the gauntlet down to people like Bill Clinton, because supposedly inside of Jeffrey Epstein's mansion on the island, there's a picture of Bill Clinton. If you haven't seen it, well, might do some checking, see what it looks like. And then, of course, talking about Larry Summers and Reid Hoffman. J.P. Morgan, money companies, Chase, money company, which brings me to ask this question. Where and how did Jeffrey Epstein become a multi-millionaire? Did he have a patent on something? Did he head up a big company like, I don't know, General Motors? Just using that. But what did he do to get all these millions and hundreds of millions of dollars he had? Nobody's really explained that one to us. Where'd he get the money? And how did he get that money? And now that the president brings up J.P. Morgan and Chase, these are money people. Now, if they handle the money for Epstein, the rule was anything over $10,000, you got to report to the government. Did somebody get more than $10,000 and not report it? Larry Summers? I mean, these are major high-powered people. Clinton says, or Mr. Trump says, we're going to start investigating them and looking into them. Now, here's another thing to think about. Stephen A. Smith. You know who he is? He's that black guy on ESPN, very outspoken. Boy, when he wants to say something, he's going to say something. Boy, he says it directly. Well, recently I saw him do one of his editorials, and he said, wait a minute. He said, all this stuff about Trump, they've had that for years. They had that during the Biden administration. They even had information dating back to when Trump was first running. And they didn't use that. Why? They had it all this time. Biden administration, if they wanted to destroy Trump, they could have put everything out that he was bad, but they didn't. So Stephen A. Smith is asking the question, something ain't right here. Someone ain't saying something right. Someone's keeping something quiet. Which brings me to this. Why are they keeping things so quiet? And why don't they want the Epstein stuff to come out? Well, because maybe, just maybe, Epstein was an intelligence operative, getting dirt on people around the world. Now, think about it this way. Prince Andrew from the UK, he's been shunned, and he lost his title in Britain because of his dealings with Epstein and a particular young lady who I think he had to pay something like 12 million pounds to. I mean, a lot of money. So he's been sort of cut out of the British monarchy. I think he had his title thrown away. So, do they know something that America doesn't know? Does the royal family, through their contacts, know exactly what Prince Andrew was doing? Because they ostracized him and tossed him out of the family. So what is going on? Is Stephen A. Smith right? Something happening that we don't know about? Is there something behind this? They don't want to release it? Because if they do, they're going to find out that Epstein was one of the biggest political operatives out there by some organization, getting dirt on people, getting power on people so they could control them. And maybe the one person they weren't able to control is Donald Trump, because when it came to Epstein, Trump was the one who went to the FBI and said, this guy's bad. Trump was the one who threw Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago. Trump found out what was going on. He said, hey, we can't allow this. So, did Epstein have all these contacts, and was somebody paying him all this money? Filter information and get bad stuff on people? And why is Ghislaine, his squeeze, his girlfriend, his whatever you want to call her, she's sitting in jail, right? Well, she's been transferred to a very nice accommodation prison, sort of like a Martha Stewart situation, living the high life. And she's still alive. But Jeffrey Epstein, DED, dead. But Stephen A. King's asking the question, why didn't the Democrats use this and that all these years? Even during the Clinton years, or even when Hillary was running for president. Why wasn't it used then? Why don't they want to bring it out now? And what are the Democrats asking for? And now Trump says, all right, you want something? We're going after Bill Clinton. We're going after J.P. Morgan. We're going after Larry Summers, Reid Hoffman, and Chase. Those are the big money people, folks. I'm telling you, the really big money. And if they were funneling money into Epstein's account from wherever it was coming from, this may be a bigger story than anybody wants to know, and nobody wants it released because there's going to be some serious dirt. Some serious people going, what? We find out there's something going on in this country that would astound everybody if we found out. Maybe the folks in England, the royal family in England knows. Prince Andrew, out. So what's going to happen in America, folks? So the president says, Pam Bondi, FBI, let him loose. Now we're going after Bill Clinton. And if they're going after Bill Clinton, what's that going to do to the Democrat Party? It's already in a difficult spot right now. Can it get even worse? Well, you want to play the game? Like those who say, fool around, find out. Probably not the right terms to use, but maybe that's exactly what's happening. FA-FO, and let the games begin. At the recent Republican Frank and Beans dinner that they have every year, well, during the dinner, Steve Shine, the head of the Republican Party, got up on the stage, or the dais, and said, anybody who's running in 2026 better step up here on the stage right now and declare the fact that you're running. Everybody looked around each other and see what was going on, and one gentleman got up and walked and stood up to the stage and on the stage, and he declared publicly, I am running in 2026. A lot of people were stunned, frankly, to tell you the truth, and some, were not stunned. But here's the big news. Former Allen County Sheriff Ken Freeze, who's now a county councilman, said, hey, I'm coming back to sheriff. That's right, Ken Freeze has announced that he is going to return to the position of sheriff, if elected, in 2026. Now, let me explain something to you. Yes, Ken Freeze was, in fact, the sheriff, 2006, 2014. Here, the Indiana Constitution says you can only be a sheriff in that office, because it's a very powerful office, for 8 years, and he did. But obviously, he left at 2014. But you can be in the sheriff's office or in an elected position like that. Well, it has to happen inside a 12-year period. So after 12 years period, it's been up, well, you can run again. And technically, that's exactly what Ken Freeze is doing. Now, Ken Freeze, when he ran for the county council, he had more votes than anybody running for county council. He had 75,515 votes. That's over 20% of all the votes. I think they had 6 people running. He's very popular, folks. Don't kid yourself. He's very popular. And, well, he's on county council and now is running for sheriff. Now, I knew he was running for sheriff because I ran into him and his lovely bride at a restaurant with my wife when I were going out for dinner, and I asked about that. I said, hey, you're going to get back in the sheriff's race? And he said to me, not without my wife's okay. Now, that's a family man. He said, yeah, we're going on vacation. We're going to talk about it and see if she thinks I should run for sheriff again. Now, why do I think Kenny Freeze will be a good sheriff? Well, a couple of things. One, whatever he had any of his deputies do, he did. Physically, he was out there running with them every time they had a run. When they were running, he was leading the pack. He was also on the SWAT team. Yep, that takes a lot of extra effort, time, and frankly, physical fitness to be on the SWAT team. He was on the Allen County SWAT team. Now, here's another thing. Ken believes in bringing back the Student Cadet Program, which I think was a very successful program, and the Citizens Academy. Now, I can tell you, Fort Wayne Police Department recently started up their Citizens Academy once again. It was the 16th. They hadn't had it in a number of years. Well, Ken Freeze wants to bring back the Citizens Academy to the Sheriff's Department. And if you've never been to one of those academies, you are missing out big time, because you're going to learn things you didn't know. And he wants to bring that back. So, Ken Freeze, former sheriff, 2006, 2014, has dropped his hat back into the ring, saying in 2026, he is running once again for sheriff. And in my opinion, he's one of the most popular elected officials, especially in law enforcement in this town, and is now on the county council where he got more votes than anybody else. That's what you say when you got a class act going on. And I believe Ken Freeze, in my humble opinion, is truly a class act and will be a great sheriff if re-elected. Well, last week here in Fort Wayne, a very important summit was held. It was the 4th annual Defense Summit held here in Fort Wayne and on the campus of Purdue, Fort Wayne. Now, I'll tell you how big it was. It was so big, the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, he attended, and he was the keynote speaker. Now, why is that so big for the Northeastern Indiana? Well, simply put, in the last few years, Indiana's gotten $2.5 billion worth of contracts. And the contracts go to companies like L3 Harris, Raytheon, BAE, Ultra Electronics. These are people that create products that people design in other places, but they got to be built. Because here we have like 95,000 skilled trade people who know how to build stuff, create stuff. We've got engineers in this town. And one of the things they're talking about recently, you may have heard about it, it's called the Golden Dome. President Trump wants to put what amounts to as a dome over the United States of America, prevent us from being attacked by other countries' missiles. And sort of like Egypt, or not Egypt, but Israel has with their Iron Dome. They have, and people trying to shoot missiles at them. So it happened here in Fort Wayne. Now, Pete Hegseth came in and said to a whole big crowd of people, he said, let me tell you something. He said, we're changing the military. We are going back to becoming a fighting force. Not a PC force, not any kind of other force, but what we're supposed to do is being warriors. As he said, no more dudes in dresses. He said, as a matter of fact, and women who are in combat positions, now I'm talking about combat positions, they have to meet, under his rules, they have to meet the same standard as men do. No dropping down standards, no changing. If you're going to be in a combat role, you've got to be as strong and as tough as the person next to you. And that's what he said. Now, please keep in mind, since he's been in office, he's gotten rid of a number of, generals, admirals, whatever high star people that were playing the politically correct game. He said, that's over. We're done with that. So what he's doing now is saying, we want to become a warrior group, because that's the purpose of the military. The purpose of the military is to stand up and fight for this country against other countries. And if you're playing a politically correct game, you ain't going to win. Unless you're tougher or badder than your opponent, you're going to lose. But that event here in Fort Wayne was something special. You had Senator Banks coming here. You had all these powerful people here from companies all around the United States that are talking about bringing their products to Fort Wayne, because here we can produce them. Yes, I realize that you have the people in Silicon Valley who design all these stuff, these incredible things they create. They design them, they don't build them. Somebody has to create them and put them together. It turns out Fort Wayne, Indiana is the hub for that. And that's why the Secretary of War arrived in our city, landing on a 12,000-foot runway at Fort Wayne International, which is the home of the 122nd Tactical Fighter Wing. And we're also a foreign trade zone. We've also got a huge ramp, things that we can do. A lot of other places can't. Fort Wayne is growing, folks, but Fort Wayne is now becoming an integral part of the military-industrial complex, in that we make things, we produce things. And frankly, we are a growing city that's growing thanks to technology. And it's going to continue that way for the foreseeable future, because Fort Wayne is becoming a hub for those things that need to be done to protect this country. For many years, when you've had a person ask you a question, sometimes you'll say, well, I don't know, but I'll Google it. That's the term everybody uses. We all know what it means. Hey, I'm going to Google it. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to go to a computer to find out the answer to a question I have. All right, fine. Everybody knows what it means. Problem is, where does Google store all that information that you ask about? Well, it turns around, there are data centers. And a couple of years ago, it was announced that Fort Wayne, Indiana was going to get a Google data center. And a lot of people were going, well, okay, that's cool. You got to have a place to store the data. Well, Google has multiple data centers all around the United States and probably the world, is my guess, because they got to store this stuff somewhere. There's a lot of stuff to store because people ask a lot of questions. So, building a new facility in Fort Wayne, Indiana. It's over on the southeast side off of Till Road. And if you've driven by it, it's a pretty big facility. Well, apparently the folks at Google said, hey, we need to increase some stuff. We need to add some more stuff in case the power goes down. Now think about it. When the power goes down, If you don't have power, you don't operate, right? Well, the Google data centers feel that they've got to keep operating. If they lose power for INM goes out and the power goes out somewhere, they've got to have backup generators because people keep asking questions. People keep wanting to know the answer to the questions, and the answers come from data centers. So what Google has said was, okay, folks, let's get together and have a meeting. And they did at the Ivy Tech Auditorium. And the IDM folks were there to say, well, let's find out what's going on here. Let's ask all the questions so people could just find out what was happening and what Google was wanting to do with that new facility they're getting ready to open up. Well, it turns out that Google wants to put in 179 diesel generators. 179. And each diesel generator has a fuel tank that holds 6,000 gallons of diesel fuel. Well, then you have to have cooling towers, and I think they're going to need 64 of those cooling towers, because when you got water circulating, the one thing you got to do is get rid of the heat that computers generate. Now, if you've ever held your iPhone or whatever phone you've got for a long time, you feel it getting kind of hot in your hand, because the more it operates, the more it generates stuff that's going to create heat. Well, computers and computer banks, where people are asking the questions, it generates a whole lot of heat. And they got to have water to cool those computers. That's the way it works. So 179 diesel generators. Well, a lot of folks in the audience were not happy about that. Well, how come we didn't know about that? What's going on here? We don't know about that. Well, folks, that's kind of what happens. You have a system, a memory system, a huge memory bank, which is what the data center is. It's going to require a lot of power if the electricity goes down. Hence, the diesel generators. I mean, they'll make a big diesel generator big enough to power the entire place if it goes down, so you have individual generators. May not need all of them, but if a section goes down, you got to have power to power it up. I realize that doesn't make everybody happy, but the one thing is, when you say I'm going to Google it, you want to make sure you get the information you're asking for, right? Because so many systems and so many companies and so many operations now depend on computer systems. And whether anybody likes it or not, that's the way humanity's going. That's the way the world's going. Because data is information, and information has to be stored somewhere. And until you figure out how to store it in something as tiny as tiny as a grain of rice, that ain't going to happen. Right now, it takes computer banks. Computer banks require a lot of electricity. And because they require a lot of electricity, they get hot. Hence, a lot of water. And if they don't have enough power, diesel generators will kick in to give them the power they need. Like it or not, that's a monster that we have taken on in this city, and other cities have had to take on the same thing. You may not like it, but that's the way of the digital world, folks. Get ready. You ain't the first place, you ain't the last place, because electricity powers computers. And the more information you want, the more electricity it's going to take to power the computers. Hence, more diesel generators are needed for backup, unless you want them to build an atomic reactor so they can create their own power. So, you want an atomic reactor in your backyard, creating power for a data plant? If you do, that could happen. Push hard enough, and you may not like what you're going to get. Just saying. Last year, I got hooked on a television series that's not on regular TV. It's on something called Paramount Plus. Paramount Plus is that internet channel, if you will. You subscribe to it, so it's going to cost you money. But they are running an incredible TV episode. And it wasn't just an episode, it's a series. The name of the series was called LANDMAN. And it's written by a guy named Taylor Sheridan. And he does Yellowstone and a few other things. Good writer, writes great stuff. But LANDMAN got me hooked last year because it's about West Texas and the oil business, namely around Midland, Odessa area, and a family and a whole bunch of other people who are basically in the oil business. Starred Billy Bob Thornton, and he's the Tommy Lewis works for this oil company. The oil company is run by a guy named John Hamm. You may remember John Hamm. He was in the Maverick movie, Top Gun Maverick, one of the admirals. He's this chairman of the company. Well, he unfortunately has got a heart problem. And that heart problem eventually takes his life. He dies at the end of the episode. And last year's episode was 10 different episodes. The trials and tribulations of the oil company. Well, Billy Bob Thornton suddenly gets put in to be the president of the company, but the CEO is the wife of John Hamm, Demi Moore. That's right, Demi Moore, the actress. She plays the wife, and now she's the big, powerful Texas oil company owner. She is the head one. Now, you figure out in the episode, the second year, we are in the second episode, or the second season, there's 10 episodes to each season. Episode number 1 of season number 2 just premiered. And there you have Billy Bob Thornton. He's now the president of the company. The CEO is Demi Moore. And she's dealing with a whole bunch of Texas oil men who think she's nothing. She calls a luncheon, gets them all together and says, "You think my husband was mean? I'm meaner." And she proceeds to tell them what she's going to do to them. They're all sitting there astounded. But Billy Bob, he's got an oil company to run. And problem is, he's got an ex-wife. He's got a son and a daughter with the ex-wife. The son, he's in the oil business too, wants to become a landman himself. Right now he's working as a wildcatter. His daughter, she wants to go to college. She's ditzy. Ends up going to TCU to be a cheerleader. Trust me. And the wife, well, the ex-wife is what she is. They're still involved. They're still lovey-dovey a little bit. And it gets wilder, folks. The only thing I can tell you is the Taylor Sheridan, when he writes a story, he reminds me a lot of Tom Clancy. Tom Clancy wrote the book Hunt for Red October and a whole lot more. Tom Clancy always had a way of his books. He would start with characters. You'd see this character, that character. Well, Taylor Sheridan's doing the same thing. Introduces you to all the characters. And then, once the characters are set, you see the plot for that season, what's going to happen. Well, that's what they're doing in Landman 2. So now you've got the new owner, new president, and a couple of new characters come on the scene. One of them is a guy by the name of Sam Elliott. You may remember him. He's got that big bushy mustache. Well, he gets involved, and it turns out he happens to be the father of Billy Bob Thornton. Yep, so now there's a father involved. So you've got the two kids, the father, and everything going on in this family in West Texas. It's called Landman. And it is one of the most powerful TV episodes, shows, if you will, series, probably more credible, than I've seen. Last year, like I said, was year number 1. This is year number 2. And the episode continues. But it is like, I don't know, man, you see things going on, you're going to go, I can't believe that's happening. But there's organized crime involved with this. There's attorneys involved. There's all sorts of stuff involved. There's a love story going on in there at the same time. Love and hate. It's all happening inside of one episode. You sit there and you watch it. It's 1 hour long. And the first episode of the second season just premiered. And I sat there and watched it and I went, whoa, where is this going to go? I found it very entertaining, folks. If you have a chance to get Paramount Plus, I realize it costs money and I feel bad about that, but that's where things are going to TV. Everything's ending up on individual channels, individual people on the internet. Paramount Plus is CBS. And this video, man, it's like nothing you've ever seen. It's called Landman. I recommend it just for the mom and dad, not for the kids, because it's pretty powerful and so is the language. But what you're going to see and what goes on reminds you of West Texas. And as somebody who's from West Texas, namely me, I can tell you that's how it exists in the Permian Basin. Midland, Odessa, that whole area, Everything's about oil, nothing else. And there's a state where a high school football team can have a $30 million stadium. That's West Texas for you. So if you get a chance, and you can get it, I highly recommend it. LANDMAN. Billy Bob Thornton, Demi Moore, Sam Elliott, Andy Garcia, he's the bad guy, and a whole lot more. And it's happened right now. So if you get it, you'll be able to see 10 weeks like nothing you've ever seen. LANDMAN, Paramount Plus. I highly recommend it if you want to spend the money.